And we are live, Senator.
Thank you very much, Alex. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. This is the Vermont State Senate Committee on Institutions. I've been getting grief from my committee about giving my opening remarks to let everybody know what goes on in here, so I'm going to completely ignore them and do it anyway. I would like to welcome you all. This is the 9th day of February, 2022. We have a couple of different topics on for conversation today, and I apologize that we are late. There was a fairly long-winded speech in support of a bill on the floor, and we had no choice but to sit and listen to the long-winded speech before we could get on to the committee site. That is not to disparage anyone. It's just that we sometimes have things outside of our control. Nevertheless, we are here. We're going to begin with Section 5 of the Buildings Community Grant Program in our spreadsheet. I have several witnesses who are lined up. I noticed some names and some faces who have not been before us in the past, so I will give my typical little talk. We are talking about language that most of us understand, but sometimes we get something said that may need some more explanation for the benefit of those who are listening on YouTube and have never been involved in this process before. So if I happen to interrupt your talk with us, it's not to be rude, it's just to let everybody get on the same page. And I'd ask you to explain what X, Y, or Z means that you have said something about. We have with us today Senator Mazza from Colchester Grand Isle, Senator Ingalls from Essex Orleans, Senator McCormick from Windsor County, and Senator Parent from Franklin County. My first person on the list is Eric Filcorn, Principal Assistant at the Department of Buildings and General Services. I'm thinking Principal Assistant. Is that a new term for you, Eric, or is that something you pulled out of the education field?
Apparently, Mr. Chairman, it comes with the job. I am the individual within the organization who is compelled to have principles.
Oh, good one. I sure hope the commissioner heard that. If not, I'll be sure to send her a link.
I will say that title means that on LinkedIn, all I get is administrative assistant job offers, but that's okay.
I understand.
I'm happy where I am.
Well, I have you first on the list. Would you like to begin our program this afternoon?
I would be delighted, Senator. Thank you.
Welcome to the floor.
Thank you. For the record, I am Eric Filcorn, Principal Assistant, Department of Buildings and General Services, and I'm here to speak to you today about Section 5, the Building Communities Grants. The history behind the development of this program goes back at least a decade. Previously, there was a section in the Capitol bill which was lovingly referred to as the deli section. And that was the place where legislators based on charisma and connections would place pet projects and fund things around the state. And in the traditional political arena, that functioned as it did for many years. And I believe it was Governor Phil Scott, who was at the time a senator on this very committee, came up with the concept of developing a competitive grant program and setting aside a chunk of money that could be spread around the state in a number of different categories. The driving principles behind this grant program, which, as I said, runs in a couple of different categories, is that it should be easy to apply. It should be the last money in, as opposed to seed money that might not see a project completed. And the project has to have broad community support. And so Judy Bruno, who keeps the trains running on time here at BGS, also runs 4 of the grant programs, or 3 of the grant programs: educational facilities, recreational facilities, and regional economic development. And then there are other grants in the category that are administered by the human services facilities as well. So there are 4 within BGS, and then there are others that reside within the Agency of Commerce, and I believe the Agency of Agriculture, hence your other guests, and they all have lovely presentations of their own. So what happens is this money is appropriated in the bill, and last year we actually increased the appropriation by about half, and we tend to get about twice as many applicants as we have grants to distribute. And the committee goes through every grant application, discusses, tries to get these projects taken care of. And we go around the state and we look at equity in terms of geographical distribution and project types, and what are these grants going to be transformative to a community. So on the economic development grants, it could be the last $20,000 for fit up for a tasting room for a brew pub, but the select board has signed on to that project and is supporting that project, and you've got letters from the community, and this is going to change downtown. It could be moving the monkey bars at a playground in Bethel. A lot of little projects, but a lot of little projects that need a little bit of help. And especially during COVID, we really focused on helping develop outdoor recreation projects. The trail network behind the Hvac ski area up in St Albans got a grant this year to help fit up signage and improvements to their trail network. And so you get recreation, you get human services, a lot of kitchen facilities for senior centers and children's centers, daycares, really helping people all over the state. And then every year after the grants go out, we get everybody together for a little photo op session, and everybody comes up to the State House, and it's a great affair. We managed to do it on the steps outside this year, but hopefully next year we'll be inside and there will be cookies and everything again. The grant committees are made up of a group of legislators and interests or experts in the different fields. So there are folks from the Agency of Human Services, the Agency of Commerce. Senator Rogers is on the committee. He's been very helpful. He made a lot of decisions this year. Wait a minute, Senator Rogers. No, that must be incorrect. Actually, that's me leading into the part where we do need to do some housekeeping, because the terms of the folks on the grant committee who are appointed by the legislature have expired. So before you guys go home this year, we need to pick some new folks from your ranks to serve on the grant committees. Senator Clarkson has been very active, and I'm trying to remember who else is in the mix. But anyway, we have the list on our website, and I'm sure Judy is working with folks on your staff to get that sorted out. That's sort of the big overview of how it works. I don't know if there are any questions yet. I stop to breathe occasionally.
You must hate it when legislators expire.
Yeah, it's well, we do need some fresh horses, sir. So if the Committee on Committees has any suggestions as to who might be next, I believe they have the power. So we look forward to seeing who the new folks are.
Senator Maz is muted.
Yeah, just let us know. We weren't aware of it. Schedule it with the pro tem, and we'll do it.
Okay, great. So I had Alex post the final distribution spreadsheets of who got what, and you can see they're listed by county and by town. A lot of folks ask for 25,000, and we can't always give them that, but we try and take the projects as far along as we possibly can.
Alex, do you have that available to put up on the screen?
I do. Do you want a particular one?
That's up to Eric, I would suppose.
You want us? We could go in order and just kind of bounce through them. I don't want to put you in an endless line by line discussion, but if you can just get a sense of it. If you put up human services, maybe.
Gotcha, can do.
This is a very good program. It's balanced out well. Everybody's entitled to a little bit of money. It's one of the better things that happened in this community over the years.
Is there a way we can figure out how much money went into Colchester Grand Isle right off?
Yes, there is. Yes, there is. Yes, there is.
Yes.
Vince Aluzzi's not the chair anymore. Okay.
One of my favorite projects from that region was, I believe we installed or helped install new access controls to the South Hero Library. They didn't even have a library until a couple of years ago. They were working out of the school, and we were the last money in for helping complete the library project, and then we helped them out with some door controls. We took the old ones from the Springfield Correctional, no,
Yeah, right.
we got them some door controls.
Alex, could you increase the size of that screen?
How's that for you?
That's better. So it took so long for the South Hero project because there was planning and design involved? Is that what?
They raised a million, they raised a lot of money to build their own library. That was very well constructed there in the islands, all by local raising money. Yep.
Well, and that's the great thing about being the last money in, is we're kind of the cavalry coming when the community has worked on it and they've exhausted their local resources, but they can also show that there is broad community support for what they're doing. And I also just want to emphasize that the application process is really simple. We get a lot of them in pencil. And I joke sometimes that we'll take crayon because it's really not that daunting. And the best way for communities to become aware of this is for you folks to turn around and tell your constituents. When someone comes to you, oh, I got this project, I just, I need a little, building communities program, and it's on the BGS website. So some examples of human services projects, you're just looking, I'm looking at a screen, I can look at the screen. You can see just like fixing the path outside the main building at Camp Thorpe, little ADA projects, different places, helping Lund finish their boiler project. So we often get into building infrastructure projects. We did replace the floor at the senior center in Pittsford. I'm just looking at the different projects here. You can scroll down a little bit to give folks some perspective, but you'll see we hit pretty much every corner of the state one way or another.
Could you go a little further down?
Yep. You're looking for a county in particular, Senator?
Yeah, just Windsor is of interest to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Windsor.
Windsor County. So the Springfield Family Center. Maybe let's.
There's a slight problem here.
You don't see anything in Caledonia County?
That is correct.
Maybe they didn't request any either. You got to have a project.
There is one in Caledonia, I thought, up on the up farther up.
Okay, so let's go back up. Not on this one. So can you open educational facilities? Alex, can you share that one? I don't share screens anymore after my experience last week. I think here's some Caledonia. So we got the Peachum Children's Center and
wow, $25,000 out of 50. Wow.
He shoots, he scores. Well, you can't get a grant if you don't apply.
Wait a minute. Caledonia, 25,000. Wow.
Yeah.
Good thing.
Okay.
Grand Isle, $7,000. See that? Look at that. And no, $3,000, Mr. Joe.
Yeah.
And Franklin County's not even there.
You
I know
double
we got
like
it last one. We're kidding, Eric.
I know. So if you heard me talking about Hvac, didn't you?
I did.
I love skiing there.
And I saw the Fairfield one. It was good too. I can sit on my deck and look at Hvac. I live on the hill just right over there. So
that's so great. Have you ever seen that movie United We Ski?
Yeah.
I love it when the guys skiing home down the backside.
Yeah, that was good.
I'm in. So that is the educational facilities. Quick overview. Do you want to, Alex, you want to open up the recreational facilities? So as you can see, if you don't see your part of the state reflected on one of these, chances are it gets picked up in another category. And sometimes, like in the case of the Addison County one, it was helping get BYCC staff, Youth Conservation Corps staff, to help with the project. There are a lot of just little playground projects are often my favorite. We get a lot of literature on the latest in play structure technology.
Does our present governor hand out the checks, make a big deal, like a big ceremonies where he hands the check out.
We did do that this year.
Yeah,
Um,
Howard Dean used to scold us for the deli section that we were spending too much money, and then he would give the money out.
Right.
And he was the hero.
Yeah. We did the whole ceremony in 20 minutes on the front steps, and it was about 15 degrees out, but we got the photos and the checks. And I remember, I think it was 3 years ago, we did the ceremony in room 10, and Speaker Johnson was there, and it was like I think the high point of comity that I've seen in the State House. Everybody was happy. Everybody was, playing well with their constituents and each other. And I often think of that day on some of the less friendly days around the building. So we can come together, especially when it comes to getting money out to the communities.
Must have been a pre-2020 election. Is that what it was?
Probably so. It might have.
Alex, can I get you to scroll back up to item number 17? I have a question for you, Eric.
Well, let's hope.
So the covered bridge reconstruction. Do you know whether anybody in the town of Linden has approached this grant for the, I want to call it the Stanford Bridge, but that's not the right word. We have a bridge in town that is in need of repair. It's not on the state highway. It is a pedestrian bridge.
Huh.
And I'm wondering if there are ground rules for how you can get into this money.
I would almost want to yield to Laura Trishman, who is she here today with us?
She is.
Okay, she may have a better sense of that where the line is between covered bridges that transport vehicles and pedestrians and what's historic and what's not. In the case of the covered bridge in Jericho, I know because my kids play soccer in this park, it's the only way into the park. And the project itself was, I think, only to dismantle the existing bridge. It wasn't necessarily setting out to construct the new one. And I think Jericho got a grant for their actual community center over in Jericho Center. And so this one didn't make the cut this time. But if I don't see why it would be excluded if it's pedestrian, especially if it's connecting, recreational uses. If it's like near a park or a trail network or something like that, it doesn't seem like a stretch.
Okay. Well, we've got Laura Trishman on the screen somewhere, and we'll be talking to her in a minute. So
the last one in the BGS category is the Regional Economic Development Grant. And this is one of the rare situations where state capital dollars can go to a private business. And the way it works is they're routed through the Regional Economic Development Authority. And I believe the town in which the business resides is the grant recipient or co-recipient. So it's really for, projects where there's a small business downtown and you see improvements as being transformative to the regional economy one way or another. You'll notice this was a big year for embroidery and knitting. There are a number of grants for knitting machines and embroidery. I think there was one up in your county where it's Classic Designs.
Caledonia, Franklin.
Yep.
Franklin. Wow.
Franklin. Yeah.
Boy.
I
What
know.
county are you from, Joe? What county are you from, Joe?
All the businesses are moving to Franklin.
Yeah.
I don't blame them.
Well, here you go, Senator. The renovations to the Grand Isle Lake House. We're helping them fix a kitchen. So, but it's true. There's not a lot coming from that area.
Well, they all have the opportunity to apply.
Yes, everybody has the opportunity to apply.
That's right,
And
that's right.
if you want to apply, you can contact Judy Bruno at BGS, and she will get you what you need to get it done. The regional economic development ones actually do need a business plan. That is like the most advanced piece of paper you're going to have to generate to get in on this program. So that's the BGS piece of it. And I believe this coming year, they've extended the deadline. It used to be the beginning of July. I think they're moving it more towards the fall. And that'll be on the website as well. We'll be publishing that along with the list of new committee members once we get that moving. And if you don't have any other questions about this part of the program, I would probably yield to one of my colleagues from Commerce or Ag to explain how their part of the program works. And they have much prettier pictures than I do.
Oh,
When
good.
I saw their presentations, I realized it was going to be a graphics arms race, and you just can't win when you have the Agency of Commerce.
Eric, Alex, could we take the screen share down, please? And Eric, thank you very much for that presentation. I have Emily Lapusky as the next person on my list. Emily, have you been before us before? Okay.
Just once a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, so you've heard my speech, and my committee doesn't have to throw me out the door because of giving you the basic presentation. But welcome back.
Thank you. So for the record, I'm Emily Lapusky. I'm the Marketing and Export Program Lead for the Development Division at the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. And I'm happy to provide a quick overview of the fiscal year 22 funding for the Fairs and Field Days capital grants. Excuse me, the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets has administered the Agricultural Fairs and Field Days capital grants competitive program and stipend fund for over 10 years. This funding is appropriated yearly to the Vermont Agricultural Fairs Association to assist with fairs and field days throughout the state with capital improvement and operational costs. The Vermont Fairs and Field Days draw over 300,000 visitors each year, and many of these fairgrounds are utilized for other events around their fairs and field days annually. They also offer opportunities for the agricultural community to really highlight their practices, products, skills, and livelihood that are a part of the success of maintaining Vermont's working landscape. There is an established Agricultural Fairs and Field Days Capital Program Advisory Committee. They administer and coordinate the grants made pursuant to this section as defined in the capital grant statute. And this committee met last month on January 19th, I believe it was, to review this year's capital grant applications before the awards were announced on February 1st. And for this year's funding round, there was a total of $407,299 available to distribute for this round of stipends and capital grants, of which $297,299 was available for the capital grants and $100,000 for the stipends. We did have 10 fairs apply for these capital grants, and almost all of the fairs had requested the maximum amount of $35,000, with the exception of 3 fairs who had come close but not quite at that maximum budget. The total grant request from the original applications was just about $335,000, which is about $38,000 over the budget that we had for this year. And the committee agreed to keep Franklin County's request of $26,000 to ensure that they keep the 15% required match amount, and divided the remaining funds evenly across those remaining 9 fairs at $30,144 each. And I'm sure many of you are aware of Franklin County Field Days' current situation. And after a few discussions between leadership in the agency, the advisory committee expects to award that specified grant, but it is staying disbursement to evaluate the impact that House Bill 610 may have on the future location of Franklin Field Days, to really evaluate how any relocation might impact the grant award, and to ensure that they're used to support a lasting project as defined by the capital grant investment requirements. A quick overview of this year's applications and projects. There were about 6 projects that are either, that are building new structures on their fairgrounds, repairing some historic buildings on the fairgrounds, and we saw a lot of interest this year in some fairs either replacing tents or old buildings that they can now use in the off season to provide winter storage, which will be a great funding opportunity to last throughout the year, so they don't have to rely so heavily on the fair and field day itself. There was also about 4 lighting projects, many of which are replacing 20 to 30-year-old lights that are on the fairgrounds itself, to new LED lights, expanding capacity across the field, the fairgrounds, and to really kind of help with the efficiency. That was a really short but sweet overview, but I just want to be respectful of everyone's time. More than happy to provide any additional information on the coronavirus relief funding from last year and the COVID investments, or any information about how the regular appropriation is used if the committee has any questions or needs any further clarification.
So Senator Mazza, did you know that you could actually store your cars in fair locations?
Yes, we pay a storage fee. I don't store mine there, but we have storage there. Yeah. Matter of fact, this grant keeps a lot of fairs going in Vermont. Without this grant program, they would have been gone a long time ago, from Franklin to other small towns in Vermont. It's one of the greatest. I'll tell you, it really is helpful, because many of these fairs are struggling, and just to get a bathroom installed or a water line replaced, they don't have the money. So I can tell you that that's a good program.
I will agree with that. And I'm just reminded of a funny story from this past summer when I was leaving the State House on the western side of the building, went out Baldwin Street and then came down to the light, turned left, was heading back to east on State Street. And in the oncoming lane was this brilliant yellowish orange Corvette, brand spanking new, shining like crazy. I'm thinking to myself, this is either a really young guy with a trust fund, or it's got to be some old guy trying to show off. Lo and behold, as I went up next to it, there's Senator Mazza sitting in the driver's seat. I forgot to remind myself of that. I was going to tell you that story.
I'm glad you told that story, Joe. That was thank you. I'm going to miss you.
I was going to turn around and chase you, but I figured I don't want to get in trouble. Emily, thank you very much for coming along and giving us an update. I'm assuming that all of this conversation is happening with our counterparts in the House as well.
Not yet, but I'm sure it will be shortly.
Okay. Next on my list is Laura Trenchman. Welcome back to the forum, Laura. And I'll throw out to you the question about Linden's covered bridge, which is the only remaining Paddleford covered bridge in at least New England, if not the East. No?
No, not exactly right.
All right.
The Sanborn Bridge is one of 2 we know of in Vermont. The designer builder was from New Hampshire, so there's several in that location. But we've been meeting with the town of Linden and having conversations. It is still privately owned, but once it's owned by the municipality, it is eligible for one of our grants.
Good. I knew those conversations were taking place, but I wasn't sure you were directly involved, and I'm very happy to hear that.
It is also the recipient of a Paul Brune revitalization grant through the Preservation Trust of Vermont. So
they already got some money. That's enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay then.
All right. So welcome back to institutions.
Thank you very much. For the record, my name is Laura Treishman. I am the Vermont State Historic Preservation Officer, and with me today is Caitlin Corkins, who is our tax credit and grant coordinator. She is dealing with a hoarse throat, so I'm not quite sure how much speaking she will do, but I do have a presentation that I can share with you.
Great. Have you been given screen sharing privileges?
I have. Yeah. Alex is all on top of that. I wanted to give you a brief overview of the historic preservation grants and the barn grants. The historic preservation grants made it to the deli menu in 1986. They have provided since then $5.78 million in funds for the rehabilitation and preservation of close to 600 of Vermont's iconic community buildings. This includes town halls, museums, theaters, libraries, recreation centers, covered bridges, anything that is owned by a municipality or a nonprofit. There is a 50-50 match, and these applications can go up to $25,000 each. All of the resources must be eligible for or listed in the National Register of Historic Places, and we help all of the applicants determine whether it has been listed already or it's eligible for, and if it's eligible, we kind of encourage them to proceed with National Register listing. The projects must be completed within 2 years, and for the most part, everybody in these grants gets them done on time. Every once in a while, we do have to give some extensions. The award process is done very carefully through Caitlin and with the Vermont Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. And the criteria is very strongly based on the standards for rehabilitation that come to us from the Department of Interior, National Park Service. In 2021, 13 of the 37 applications submitted were awarded just over $200,000. And based on the work estimates, we factored in that this is leveraging $465,000 to the community with probably about 25 construction jobs. For the next cycle in 2022, we had 41 applications requesting over $600,000, and we had just under $300,000 to award. This was the additional funding of $100,000 that you graciously gave us. And as you can see, there continues to be pressure to this grant program. We were only able to award 19 of those 41 applications. Those were just awarded in December.
Laura, can I ask, is there a method by which you make decisions on who gets what? For instance, is it first come, first served, or is there some parameters on how you award the money?
No, it is done by the Vermont Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. This is a governor-appointed commission. Caitlin presents the ones that she feels have met the geographical coverage, that have not gotten grants from us in the past 2 years, and will give good bang for the buck, have full applications. And then we always have 4 or so alternatives, which usually end up getting funding as well.
Okay.
I'm going to let Caitlin talk you through. These are some of the projects that were just awarded this past December.
Thanks, Laura. And I do apologize. I am unfortunately still pretty hoarse, but I'm hoping you can all hear me okay. So I'm just going to go really quickly through these. We thought it would be fun for you to see a slice of the projects that we funded. As Laura mentioned, this is the newest group just awarded in December. So starting in the top left, the Kimball Public Library was designed by architect H.M. Francis and Sons and funded by a local benefactor, Robert J. Kimball. It's still the community library and meeting place. The building is a 3-story brick and brownstone Renaissance Revival building surmounted by a slate roof and painted copper clad cupola over a stunning stained glass window, which is what you see there in the picture. So we awarded the town $20,000 in grant funds to support a really large restoration project they have planned to replace the copper cladding on the cupola, restore the skylight, and make structural repairs to the cupola framing. The next project is down in Weathersfield, the Dan Foster House. This was the original dwelling on this property, constructed in 1785 by the first minister of Wethersfield, Reverend Dan Foster. After being abandoned, the house was restored in the 1940s by Raymond Beardsley. And then following his death, the Wethersfield Historical Society was formed basically to save the building. They took ownership of the property and opened it as a museum. We gave them a grant of $20,000 to do some framing repairs and install drainage to address an area of chronic moisture issues that was causing some deterioration to the building. The next one on the list is the Orleans County Historical Society. This is a group that's well known to our grant program. They've come to us many times in the past. The most recent application was for Athenian Hall, which is also called the Old Stone House. It was built between 1833 and 1836 by Alexander Twilight to serve as a dormitory for the Orleans County Grammar School. The building wasn't used until 1925. I'm sorry, that's not right. The Orleans County Historical Society took possession of the building in 1925 after it was threatened with demolition. And they now own several buildings in the village of Brownington. Their most recent grant application, this is a really modest request of about $1,500 to do some interior plaster repairs and painting in the museum of some rooms that are currently underutilized. They have plans they want to expand into these spaces to provide some new and rotating exhibits for the public. We were talking about covered bridges earlier. So the town of Warren and their covered bridge sought a grant from us this year. This bridge was built in 1879 by Walter Bagley and was an integral part of the Lincoln Gap toll road when the town was first settled. It is still used for traffic and is definitely a landmark at the village's southern gateway. So this project received funding through VTrans, a transportation enhancement grant. Unfortunately, when the project went out to bid in May of 2021, the numbers came out more than the funding available. And then construction was further delayed by the pandemic. So this award of $20,000 from our grant program will be that last money in, that final piece of the puzzle, so the project can move forward this spring. Next up, we have the town of Danville and the Danville train station, which was originally constructed in 1871 and served as a passenger and freight depot for more than a century. The town was awarded $20,000 in grant funding to support a major rehabilitation effort. They want to repurpose the depot as a transportation hub for users of the adjacent Lamoille Valley Rail Trail. So this is a great intersection between historic preservation and recreation. The building will have a presence with the Historical Society and the Chamber of Commerce, hosting information kiosks that promote local businesses and events, and having rotating educational displays. They're also going to provide public access amenities, including water, public restrooms, bike parking, and repair station for users of the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail. And the last one on this slide is the St Albans Museum, located just west of Taylor Park on Church Street. It's the former St Albans Academy, which served as the local high school from 1861 until 1929, and then was utilized as an elementary school until 1970. The building, in the mid-70s, the building became the home of the St. Albans Museum. And the first two floors of the building are dedicated to artifact exhibits, while the third floor is the home of the Bliss Room, which is an auditorium serving as an important event space for both the museum and the larger St. Albans community. We awarded them a grant of $20,000 to make some important repairs to the building's slate roof and cupola. And I'll turn it back over to Larry.
Caitlin, before you move on, and don't pull down this photograph yet.
Sure.
I just want to point out to the committee and especially to Commissioner Fitch, if she happens to be listening, that brick building up there, and it's actually not brick, it's granite, up in the upper right-hand corner, the old stone house. Alexander Twilight was the first person of color who was not only in Middlebury College, but was also elected a member to the legislature. And he began building this particular building, which is 26 by 66 feet and is 4 stories worth of granite in 1834. And he had to finish it himself because the board that he was originally contracting with to get the money from decided to stop giving money. So he literally had to finish it by himself. But I just want to point out that he began building in 1834 and was done by 1836. And I don't think he had to have anybody planning and designing, which would have taken as long as some other folks to build a building like this. But I just wanted to point out that we could do things like that in the kingdom way back then.
I thought you were born there, Joe. I didn't know if that was it.
Yeah. No, I was born a year or so later. I just wanted to point that out for the benefit of the commissioner. I hope she's listening.
Sure. Thank you, Senator Benning, for poking the bear. We can continue to have that conversation.
Okay. Thanks, Caitlin.
Thank you.
I will add to what Caitlin was saying, that these grants, the historic preservation grants, are part of larger preservation rehabilitation projects that these communities and nonprofits are undertaking, and they typically help fill a gap, or they're focusing on character defining features that make these resources worth protecting and iconic to us. The historic barn and agricultural building grants, this also is a 50-50 grant program that we operate. It began in 1992, and it is the oldest state barn grant program in the country. It has been modeled after by other states. We are regularly being contacted by other states asking how we do this, how we are able to support these communities and individual farmers in their preservation efforts. So I think it's a really great model. So far, it's given $4.1 million in grants to restore and repair 433 historic barns and agricultural outbuildings. The applications can go up to $15,000 per application. This also is a 2-year, 3-year fuzzy award period, because the vast majority of these grants are given to private property owners who are actively farming their properties. For a period there, we were seeing a number of event barns using this grant funding, but I would say that most of them now are active farm properties. And again, the Vermont Advisory Council on Historic Preservation reviews and ranks these and awards the projects based on the standards for rehabilitation. So the idea is that you're replacing in kind, you're saving the building. Most of these grants are to support structural threats to these buildings, securing foundations, fixing roofs, securing the walls, cupolas, things like that. So keeping these buildings in use, getting them back in use. There were 44 applications in 2001 when we had just a little over $200,000. We do use this program sometimes as mitigation. Down in Windham County, we had a barn mitigation project through Act 250, and we got some funding that was put into only the barns in that county. So that's why there's some additional funding. We leveraged $635,000 in the restoration and rehab of generating probably about 30 construction jobs for Vermonters. This past October, we got 52 applications. Those are going to be awarded in a few weeks by the Advisory Council. If all of those were funded, it would be over $2 million in project costs. So you can see the stresses that this program is taking, all of these grants are taking, anything in the building communities, I think are getting more applications and requests for funding than we actually have. And there's really great interest.
I'm curious, Laura, in a previous conversation, we were talking about a barn on Route 2 in Plainfield. And I don't know whether anybody has ever applied, but it continues to deteriorate, can't be 25 feet off the road. And the way that it's deteriorating, it's going to drop onto Route 2 at some point in time. But I'm curious to know whether anybody that owns that property has contacted you for any kind of relief.
I can answer
Yeah.
that question. I know the one you're talking about. Unfortunately, the owner's not interested in applying for a grant. He's been approached by a number of people who've offered to help, pointed him toward the grant program. But you know, it's a voluntary thing and we can't make people apply. Unfortunately, it's really, really sad to see it deteriorating the way it is.
Yeah, I appreciate that information, Caitlin. I'm glad that at least somebody was in communication about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have more pretty pictures here of some more projects. These were grants that were funded last February, because as Laura mentioned, our newest crop of applications, we haven't quite made the awards yet. So I'm gonna go through these as well, and please, you know, if you have questions about any of them, feel free to stop me. The first one is Whitehill Farm in Ryegate. The horse barn at this farm was constructed around 1810 and sits on 30 acres of farm that's been owned by 4 generations of the Dixon family before it was sold in 1912. The name Whitehill came from a later family who owned the property until 1964. And the current owners purchased the property in 2002. The barn is in active agricultural use. A neighboring Jersey farmer uses the barn to store hay and heifers from his farm. It's also got a community apple press, which I think is just great. Grant funds are going to be used to make the building weather tight, including repairs to the metal roof and flashing, replacement of deteriorated siding, repair of the existing doors and windows, and then some drainage work as well. The next one is in Peacham. This is an active sheep farm that consists of 37 acres. It's known locally as the Samuel G. Hidden Place, honoring the owner, a previous owner who operated a sawmill here between 1820 and 1869. The current owners purchased the property in 2019 and they breed sheep for meat and fiber. And a matching grant supported work on the farm's main barn, including replacement of deteriorated framing at the northwest corner, installation of a French drain, and installation of gutters and downspouts to control water runoff from the barn. This is a project that, as I mentioned, was awarded last February, and this is one that was really on top of things. The work on this project's already completed. Next up, we have the Lily Farm in Woodbury. It's a 102-acre property that includes several historic agricultural buildings, a carriage barn, a 3-story high drive barn with a milk house, and the main barn, circa 1850, was the building that they sought funding for. The farm was occupied by the Lilly family from the mid-1800s until 1901. And since that time, it's gone through a number of different owners, but all have maintained the property's open fields, woodlots, and these great agricultural buildings. A matching grant will enable repair of that main barn's high drive and address drainage issues along the barn's east elevation and northwest corner. Down in Wardsboro, we have the Brigg Farm, 19th century barn and farmhouse set on 78 acres next to Fairview Cemetery. The farm was established around 1809 by Amasa Turner, And then it was purchased by Wilbur Brigg in 1867. And obviously it's still known by his name. The current owners purchased, actually their parents purchased the property in 1969 and used the barn for a small business, which was called Woodsmith Gallery. So this is an example of a barn that got repurposed for a different commercial use. Grant funds will be focused on removing some silt in the barn's lower level, installing drainage, rebuilding the stone foundation, and repairing the cells. After restoration, the owners want to open the barn up to the public in partnership with the Wardsboro History Group. The next one is in St. Johnsbury, Roots 2 Farm, which is a really stunning, very large gambrel barn. The current owners purchased this 35-acre farm from the Vermont Land Trust in 2016 as part of the Farmland Access Program. So a wonderful combination of land conservation and historic preservation, of course. In addition to the farmhouse and the main dairy barn, the property has a horse barn, carriage barn, and a sheep shed and a hay barn. So lots of buildings that they are responsible for. The previous owners had used the property as part of a Jersey dairy farm, but the new owners have begun a certified organic vegetable and fruit operation and have converted the milk house into a farm stand. So a matching grant will support work to repair the barn's stone foundation and install drainage along the west elevation of the barn.
So Caitlin, let me freeze you for just a second and throw out a question to my committee. Hey, committee, what do those barns in Ryegate, Peacham, and St. Johnsbury all have in common?
They're in your district.
Thank you. Okay, Caitlin.
I just wanted, for the record, I just wanted that to be known to the committee in case they weren't looking. Yeah, that's good.
Went through and pulled out pictures of all of the ones that are in any of your districts.
Well, the only thing the only thing the chair is unhappy about is pictures not in any of them. That's what he looks forward to, his picture. Yeah.
So I also included a summary of the 2021 awards that include a summary sheet with some thumbnail pictures of them. And then as soon as the awards are made in February for the barn grants, we will be emailing you that list.
Great. I still have Michelle Bailey, Senior Program Manager for the Vermont Arts Council. I'm not exactly sure how you fit into this conversation, but welcome to Senate Institutions.
Thank you, Senator Benning. My name is Michelle Bailey. I am the Senior Program Manager at the Vermont Arts Council, and I oversee the Cultural Facilities Grant Program, which is one of the Building Communities Grants programs. So I do have a presentation for you. Alex is going to put it up on the screen for you to share it, and I will run through it for you. I also want to thank you for the opportunity to come and talk to the committee. The Arts Council is grateful for the legislature's strong support of the Cultural Facilities Grant Program. And before I begin, I also want to thank you, Senator Benning, for co-sponsoring our Creative Sector Recovery Bill. So let me just see, is the presentation up on the screen for you?
It is.
It is, okay. I'm just not seeing it.
We have the title page in front of us right now.
Okay, great. Okay, now I've got it here. So next slide, please. I think you all know that the Cultural Facilities Grant Program is one of many grant programs that the Arts Council administers as Vermont State Arts Agency. It's part of our mission to advance the arts and creativity in communities across Vermont. And we know that cultural institutions are key to the health and vitality of Vermont communities. Next. National research demonstrates that across the nation, the creative sector is a catalyst for economic growth, and that is particularly important to the economy of rural states like Vermont. In two recent national studies, the Northeast Kingdom is cited as a case study of the importance of the creative economy to economic recovery and resilience. The NEK is one of 11 case studies studied in the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies' recently published Creative Economies and Economic Recovery document. And from our own research, we know that jobs in the creative sector make up about 9.3% of all employment, which is about 40,894 jobs in 2018. We also know that strong and vibrant arts institutions are key to attracting tourist dollars and bringing in new residents. The majority of millennials and Gen Xers say they look for communities with a vibrant art scene when deciding where to relocate for a job. But most of all, excuse me, our theaters, libraries, town halls, and community spaces are part of Vermont's identity and the character of so many of our communities. So now, when Vermont is struggling with the impact of the pandemic, we know our cultural organizations are essential to helping our communities to recover and rebound. When a theater closes down for an entire season, it's not just the theater that loses revenue. An entire downtown loses revenue from the restaurants, shops, and galleries and hotels where ticket holders would have spent money. Our communities need the arts to bounce back. Next. In addition to the economic impact, by bringing people together in our cultural facilities and revitalizing these places with activities such as performances, festivals, fairs, exhibits, and classes, we foster social inclusion and community empowerment, creating an important sense of civic pride. Next. So we see the Cultural Facilities Program as a critical part of building and sustaining our state's cultural infrastructure. The grants are administered by the Arts Council in collaboration with the Historical Society and the Division of Historic Preservation, and grants go to nonprofit organizations and municipalities to expand their reach, improve safety, and ensure that the arts are accessible to all Vermonters. Grants range from $1,000 to $30,000 and do require a one-to-one match. Next. They support improvements to the physical infrastructure to increase the usability of the space for cultural programming, things like electrical upgrades and fire alarm systems, HVAC renovations, ADA compliance, hazard mitigation, and theatrical lighting, just to name a few. And since 2001, thanks to this program, we have made 326 grants totaling $3.6 million to support theaters, museums, town halls, and community art centers and municipalities across Vermont. Next. And one more, sorry, I just jumped ahead there. In 2014, we started collecting grantee data and final reports on the number of local Vermont vendors supported for the improvements to these facilities. Out of the 422 businesses paid in that period, 77% of those were local Vermont businesses, such as electricians, HVAC companies, plumbers, contractors, etc. And of that 77%, nearly 1.6 million in grants generated nearly 3.9 million in matching funds, contributing over 5 million to the local economy. And that number is just for the Vermont contractors and vendors alone. It also does not include the ongoing economic impact of the events and activities that I mentioned before that happen in the spaces after these cultural assets are revitalized for community use. So just a few examples of some of the funds, of how the funds have typically been used. The Franklin Town Hall received a grant to support installation of a sound system with assistive listening devices and acoustic curtains for the windows. This will have a great impact on the ability of all community members to enjoy cultural events in the space. Next. Caledonia Grange Hall received a grant to support electrical upgrades on the ground floor. Having the ground floor of the building electrified again has effectively doubled the functional space in the building. And last spring, the Grange Hall hosted a week of after-school art workshops for kids and regular community meals with live music on the porch, in addition to some other activities. Next. At the Clemens Family Farm, grant funds were used to pour a new cement floor on the lower level of the historic Big Barn. This area will be used for visual arts programs, including exhibits, artist talks, art classes, artist studios, spaces, meetings, and workshops. Next. And the Sheldon Historical Society received a grant to support the installation of an accessible restroom and a lift to the second floor meeting and event space. And this will more than double their capacity for events, discussions, small concerts, and displays, while enabling participation by visitors living with decreased mobility. The Broadbrook Community Center lacks insulation, making the space prohibitively expensive to heat in winter and stiflingly hot in the summer, severely reducing its usefulness as a community center. Funding for insulation will provide Guilford with a space that can be comfortably and affordably utilized year-round by the community for cultural activities. And the Friends of the Union Meeting Hall received a support for a new accessible second entrance and exit. This will provide accessibility to all members of the community and increase the capacity of the building from 49 to more than 130 per fire safety codes, allowing them to host larger and more inclusive events. So I'm proud to say that since we've been administering the program, we've made grants in all 14 counties across Vermont, and 70% of the funding from this program has supported cultural facilities in Vermont's most rural communities, protecting libraries, town halls, and community buildings that serve our most isolated and least affluent residents. And the need continues to far outstrip the available funds. I think, have we advanced forward? I think I jumped and forgot to say advance there. Alex, I should be on slide 16 if you're there.
You are.
We are there.
Okay, great. I can't, the slide disappeared on me here. And the need, as I said, continues to far outstrip the available funds, even with this year's funding increase, which we greatly appreciated. In FY22, we received 35 requests for funds totaling over $737,000, with the $300,000 we had in grant funds available. And this is the highest number of applications and grant amounts requested since we have been administering the program. In the last 5 years, we've seen a 59% increase in the number of applications submitted, and the need for Vermont to invest in our cultural infrastructure, demonstrated every year when we have more applications than we can support, has been made much more evident during the pandemic. Aging buildings continue to be in need of upgrades and repair to make them safe and accessible. And many of these buildings are ones that Vermont has made considerable investment in. For decades, both state funds and private funds have supported preservation and renovation of these facilities. There's a compelling need to continue to make this investment to ensure that our cultural facilities survive, that our libraries, downtown theaters, and community centers are there and bring us all back together again and help communities rebound economically when pandemic restrictions are lifted. So thank you so much for inviting me to share a little bit about the wonderful projects this funding has supported. And thank you for all your support of the Cultural Facilities Grant Program, as well as all the other building communities grants. And there is attached a more complete list of our FY21 and FY22 grants if anyone is interested in it. But thank you very much.
Michelle, thank you very much for coming along. And I want to say on behalf of the committee to you, as well as to everybody else that's made presentations today. I do a lot of traveling around the state, and I think it is very noticeable that many of our historical structures are looking much better. And you folks are all doing a lot of hard work, and it is appreciated. And I think it definitely is noticed as you travel around the state. So thank you all for coming by. I'm sure we'll be back in touch with you in the probably not too distant future. As you know, the bill that we normally work on is still over in the House, and it will eventually work its way over onto our side of the building. And when that happens, oh, there may be a reason to bring you all back and have some more conversation. But thanks for coming by. Committee, we're going to shift over and welcome Commissioner Jennifer Fitch from BGS. We're going to talk a little bit about the potential sale of Baldwin houses and space management. And I see, Commissioner, you have a couple of folks, including your principal assistant. You weren't on earlier when he defined that job title, were you? It was cute.
Get me into trouble, Madam Commissioner.
Yes, and what did you say, Mr. Phil?
I said that as principal assistant, I was the individual within the organization assigned the task of having principals.
We can't repeat it all, Jennifer.
Am I fired yet?
Are you trying to imply you're the only one that has principles, Mr.
Well,
Filcorn?
that was the joke. That was the joke.
I will say that he was
Really?
joking at the time, but I promised him that I would get him into trouble as soon as you appeared. Okay, well,
Usually, Mr. Filcorn defines his job as other duties as assigned.
That's true.
It's never a good thing when they refer to you as Mr. at your job, Mr. Filcorn.
yeah, I was going to say, Eric, when my wife calls me Mr. Benning, I know I'm in deep doo-doo.
Right.
Well, don't hold it against him, Commissioner. He was having fun with us. Welcome, and I understand we're going to talk a little bit about the capital bill budget adjustment, and then we're going to get an update on the State House HVAC schematic designs. But let's start off with the 2:15 presentation, which is only 47 minutes or so late. I should apologize because we were caught on the floor for a good half hour longer than any of us had anticipated. But that's the way it works in afternoon committees.
Well, Mr. Chairman, it is my honor to wait for both you and your committee for as long as it takes for the opportunity for us to pitch getting authority to sell 2 of the Baldwin properties, which, for the record, my name is Jennifer Fitch. I have the honor of being the BGS Commissioner for the Department of Buildings and General Services. And for anybody playing from home and for the committee, I believe this is the 3rd time we are asking permission to sell both 1416 Baldwin, which is 1 building, but it has an address that toggles over 1416, and 9 Baldwin. You did give us permission last year to sell 13 Baldwin, and we thank you very much for giving us authority to do so.
High market value, high market value.
For market value, and we will give you some numbers. I will tell you that that property is currently under sale, so we can't provide any specifics because it's still considered to be under negotiation. However, I believe you'll be very pleased to find the results of that sale once it is completed.
Is there an Ingalls real estate sign on the front lawn right now?
It might be a slight conflict, one I
Yeah, it might be a-
wish to stay out of.
You wouldn't want that in the page of the paper.
So with respect to the potential sale, is there more conversation about more Baldwin Street buildings taking place?
So, Mr. Chairman, as I said, we have requested to sell both those 3 properties over the last 3 years. Last year, we were successful in working with the legislature to allow us to sell 13 Baldwin. And I want to start off with this committee because I think we all have common ground. One of the most common questions I have gotten this year in my time at the State House is, what are we going to do about optimizing state space, right? Now that we have more people working in a hybrid work model, do you really need all that space that we're occupying with our buildings, right? So I want that to be where we start the discussion from, because I think that's a fair question for people to ask me. And the answer to that is, we are looking to optimize state space. We've always been looking to optimize state space. And I want to give accolades to Eric Pembroke, who is going to jump in here in a minute, who is the new Director of Planning and Property Management. You met him earlier this year. He has successfully, and it took 4 to 5 years, he has successfully, in his short time here at BGS, helped us revise our 2012 space standards. And what those space standards are all about is optimizing state space. And so I want to thank him for that work, but that's really the foundation that we will be working off of to optimize the space that we have. Prior to the pandemic, as you know, the administration was working on optimizing our space within the Montpelier complex. Over a 10-year period, we have estimated that we will save $2 million in what we call operating costs, and we will bring in $1.4 million in the sale of the 3 Baldwin properties. Add those 2 numbers together, you're at $3.4 million over a 10-year period. Now, back before the pandemic, when state funds were limited, that was a really good chunk of money to save over a 10-year period. My understanding now, obviously, is that we have lots of federal funds that are coming into the state. And so even though we feel really good about our $3.4 million estimated savings / revenue, I recognize that at this point, that's sort of pennies to the dollar in terms of what we've been getting in for federal funds. That all being said, we are trying to do our best here at BGS, right, to lower our operational costs, because the lower we can be in our operational costs, right, the less we're charging out to our clients, right, who use our services, and the less money Vermont taxpayers are paying for our services as a whole. So it does matter to us, and we've been very diligent about that. In terms of where we are at with the Baldwin properties at the moment, as I said, you gave us authority to sell last year. We put it on the market and we're under contract currently to sell it. In terms of 1416 Baldwin, Eric Pembroke's team has been very busy. We've made a lot of moves over the summer and over the prior year, and 1416 Baldwin will be empty in a few days. There will be nobody else in that building, completely unoccupied. And then as in terms of 9 Baldwin, as you know, Mr. Chairman, last year, we also worked with the legislature. Ledge IT is moving. They currently occupy 9 Baldwin, but we are fitting up some space in 133 State Street for that to be their permanent home. And so once they move, we have no planned tenants to go into 9 Baldwin. That one will also be vacant, and we would like the authority to sell it once it's finally vacant. So with that, that's a big, broad overview. And if it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman, I would like to yield my time to Eric Pembroke. He does have a presentation to offer.
Great. Eric, welcome to Senate Institutions.
Well, thank you for having me, Mr. Chairman. I don't have very many pretty pictures of barns around the state, but I do have some information I think we'll find useful. So if we could pull that up, I believe Alex has that. And for the record, I am Eric Pembroke, the Director of Planning and Property Management for BGS.
As he's doing that, is there wisdom in approaching the Senate side of institutions prior to the House side for raising this discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd have to yield that question to Eric Filcorn. My understanding that it was his he pitched that.
Well, Mr. Chairman, Eric Filcorn, BGS, it was my bright idea. I often find that the items that appear in the authorities section of the Capitol bill are left to the last minute on the House side because of all the stuff on the front end of the bill. And you will be thrown into a conversation about this at the last minute, or may even miss it entirely. And so it's really about your chamber being aware of this proposal. That's.
I just thought you determined we were easier pickings than the other side.
Well,
that was the answer I was hoping for anyway.
Mr. Chairman, you were easier pickings.
Okay.
All right, Alex, thank you. Can you go to the next slide? So as Commissioner Fitch was just talking about, the standards. So we were able to update our standards that were from 2012 to 2022. She gave me by far way too much credit, but thank you anyway. So part of our standards we want to establish flexible, comfortable work environments, and more importantly, assign space uniformly across agencies. I think the big thing for me and for you to take away on this is what I always like to talk to is square foot per person. So we have come up with an average square foot per person, an average usable square foot of 150. So you'll see as we talk through the next couple of slides, that is really the highlight of part of the conversation. So Alex, you can go to the next slide. I think the next one we're going to start to talk about 9 Baldwin. So a lot of information here. 9 Baldwin, built in 1890, roughly just under 1,900 usable square feet. Again, I talk about this benchmark, the standard of 150 square foot usable per person. As we can see, this is an old home. It's chopped up, has a lot of common space. So that usable space for per person is 233. So it's out of our benchmark, if you will. And then we also like to look at the cost per person. We have a range of 2,200 to 3,300 per person. That's kind of a sweet spot for us to be. This building is slightly skewed on that. It's $4,300 per person. Another thing I wanted just to highlight on this is we do facility condition assessments. If we look out at our crystal ball over the next 1 to 5 years, we see about $108K being spent on various things that need to be replaced in this building. Some of the major maintenance items that we've called is another $40K. You know, the rotting deck, the trim, the support posts in the front porch, prime paint. It's an old home, and you know that really lies to the usable square feet per person. As we go to the next slide, if there's not any questions on this, the picture starts to get even worse as we look at 1416. Again, we go back to that 150 per person. We're at 327. Again, it's an old chopped up home, built in 1890, 3,100 square feet, usable square feet. That benchmark, as you can see, we're way on the other side of that one, $7,600 per person. Facilities condition assessment, we have about 158K that we predict that we need to spend on this building in the next 1 to 5 years. And things we need to do sooner than later is about 60K, which is, repair and redesign historic porch roof, install heat tape due to ice buildup, etc. Next slide, please. So, part of the larger plan, what do we want to do? We want to divest in inefficient office space. We want to relinquish expensive lease space. And as the commissioner was saying, we project over the next 10 years, roughly 2 million and generate 1.4 in proceeds from the sales. As I have listed here, the appraised value of 9 is roughly 350,000. We believe it'll bring somewhere around that number. And then the appraised value for 14 and 16, that appraised value is around 650K, and which we believe that would bring that as well. So with that information, we are requesting permission to relinquish these buildings. Questions?
That language has to appear in the capital bill, I'm assuming. And obviously that pitch has to be made while it's on the house side of the building. I don't know, Alec, yeah, thank you. I'm just looking at my screen. I don't see Becky Wasserman on the screen anyplace. I'm assuming the language has to be drafted and inserted into the bill at some point along the path, but I would highly recommend doing that while it's still in the house so that we don't have to send it back to them for getting confirmation after we've done with it, whatever we're going to do. Committee, any questions? Don't see anybody chomping at the bit. So we appreciate the heads up. We're going to anticipate having more about that conversation. Last I recall, the pushback that you were getting about sale of other properties wasn't necessarily on our side of the building, which was my reference earlier, Eric, to you thinking we were easier pickings. But anyway, the conversation has been broached, and we'll sure have some more conversation about it when the bill comes back into our door. We're going to shift gears to our last topic, and that is State House HVAC schematic designs. Oh, joy and rapture.
It's riveting stuff, sir.
Welcome back. Joe AJ, you're on the screen, and I have you as the lead for this conversation. I don't know whether you wanted to take the lead or the commissioner wanted to introduce the topic.
Engineering and design, 20 million.
It went down. It went down, Senator Massa.
Watch this, engineering and design. I'm anxious to hear this figure.
Joe, welcome back to Senate Institutions.
Well, thank you, Senator. Joe Adria, Buildings and General Services. I'm the Director for Design and Construction. Commissioner, do you want to lead in? Or you want me to take it?
No, I was just going to say thank you once again for having us in your committee, and we will do as much work as we can do on the House side, Mr. Chairman. We heard you loud and clear. We'll do the best we can on that side of the House. We would hope if we don't get the support we're looking for, that we obviously have an opportunity to try to advocate on this side as well. So we want to thank you for hearing us. And in terms of HVAC and all things the State House, Mr. Chairman, I yield all my time to Joe Asia, and I'm going to have to jump off. But thank you very much for having me in your committee today.
So before you run, just so you know, the way that this works, when the House bill comes over, if there's a difference between what they want to do and what we want to do, normally in the legislature, there's a committee of conference. But in our case, I simply send Senator Mazza over to have a personal chat with the chair, Alice Emmons, and somehow everything gets resolved. So
We'll
just
take
so
it.
you know, if you want to short circuit everything, those are the two people you want to talk to.
Take care of it.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much.
Joe, that brings us back to HVAC schematic designs.
Yes. So if you remember way back when, the summer of 2018, we had a high humidity and mold issue in the building. And we did some abatement of the mold in there. And what came out of that was basically we need a way to dehumidify the air in the State House. And so with that, we were appropriated $500,000 in acts of 20. And we've gone out to bid. We've hired an engineering firm to do an assessment of the building and provide programming and a schematic design. We are just about ready to finalize and approve the schematic design that was put forth. I believe Judy sent up an attachment. I don't know, Alex, if you have that or not. Because I do have Tay Southworth here, my mechanical engineer. If you have that, otherwise we will verbally run through it. Good. So what we have here, and Senator Mazza, we do not hit the $20 million mark. At least not yet.
2.7 million for the installation.
We'll get into that. This is what's now going to be in front of you is the total project that we have to date at the end of schematic design. And because of the need to push forward and hurry up and do something this coming summer, we have broken it out into phases, phase A, B, and C. And I'll have Tay Southworth describe each one of those. Along this package is also what a floor plan or floor plans showing the indication of what the phases will hit. And then because of the high cost, we also have some alternate deducts that we could take and or phasing that could be done at a later date. So Tay, could you lead us through this document?
Good morning, committee. Mr. Chairman, my name is Tay Southworth. I'm a mechanical engineer and a project manager for the Department of Buildings and General Services. Originally, we were going to be spending this summer putting together the construction documents for bidding in the fall winter time to start construction next year, but we were requested to accelerate the project to try to get something done this year. Looking at what was in the project, we looked at replacing air handler 4, which is in the basement of the east end of the building, also referred to as the bomb shelter. It services the Senate committee rooms and the offices on the second floor of the east end of the State House, and also installing a boiler, which will allow us to do reheat in the summertime. In order to control humidity, you have to cool the air down to wring the water out of it, but then we have to heat it back up because nobody wants to be in the building when it's 55 degrees. Going forward, phase B will replace the rest of the air handlers that service the rest of the State House, the House chamber, the Senate chamber, the offices on the east end of the building, including the governor's ceremonial room, the Cedar Creek room, the lieutenant governor's spaces, and all of the House committee rooms in the annex. A third phase would be replacing the air handlers that service the cafeteria and the legislative council. And I pushed that all the way to the end just in case something happens and we need to move that to a different project.
Tug, if I could ask, phase B, where are those AHUs going to be located?
Currently, the air handlers that service the House and Senate chamber are up in the crow's nest. The air handler that services the west end of the building is in the big mechanical room by the traction elevator, which is back next to the Capitol Police Office. And the air handler that services the House committee rooms and legislative lounge is also in that big mechanical room. It pretty much backs up to room 11.
So is the assumption that these are going to remain in place whether we expand the building or not?
That is correct, because they service the areas that we aren't anticipating expanding.
Okay,
The difference is they'll be state-of-the-art, brand-new air handlers, not the ones from 1970.
right. Now, did they get us up to ASHRAE standards in the House committee rooms especially?
Yes, they do.
Thank you.
For the current occupancy, if we do expand the building and the occupancy levels of those rooms go down, we'll actually have excess ventilation.
Okay.
Phase
Were you
C.
gonna I'm sorry, we're going to go continue on?
I see Senator Mazza has a question.
Yeah, you got,
Oh, I'm sorry.
what would happen, and again, I'm not pushing it for it, what happens if they went with this $25 million expansion of the State House? What does it do to this system? Does it add on, or does it change the whole design, or how would you do that?
If the addition goes back near the cafeteria, then phase C could be taken out of this project and incorporated into that project.
Okay, so you would have to know about this phase C is going in what, a couple years, you think, or?
It'd be nice to know by the end of next summer, because by the end of the year, we'd probably like to pre-order some of the equipment so that it's on site when the legislature goes home the end of May and be ready to start construction.
Okay, thank you.
Alex, we may need to scroll down some.
So the next few drawings are the floor plans showing the areas that are affected by each phase. That's the first floor.
These color choices friendly to all senators?
Good, I tried my best.
The mezzanine. The second floor. And the 40s, the third floor.
And so with you, if you're looking at phase C, the yellow, you can really see that if there was an addition coming on the backside of the State House or the cafeteria, Alex, if you go up one more slide, that really doesn't impact us until 23-24 construction season, because that's when we were looking to have everything phased to get done that work during that time frame.
Okay.
I think we go to the alternates.
So based on the schematic design, our consultants have come up with a total project cost of approximately $15.2 million. 14 of that would be construction, $1 million of that is design. Because it's schematic design, some of the soft costs in the upfront are percentages of construction. The alternates are not directly addable. I had to actually take construction values and recalculate them. So I put together a list here. If you were to take alternate 1 and 2, what the value would be. If we were to select alternate 1 and 3, what the value would be. Alternate 2 and 3, and all 3 alternates. So these would be the deductions from that 15.2 million.
When you're talking 2 or 3 years down the road, how can you come close to estimating the cost? Wouldn't that cost change dramatically in the next 3 years?
We are right now have an RFP out to hire a construction manager. So we would probably have a guaranteed maximum price going into the middle of the summer.
But right now, Senator, it's basically, it's in today's dollars is the best we can do.
Okay, because you're going to be talking another I'll bet you $6-7 million more if this was completed, I imagine. In today's world.
It very well could. This is today's numbers. And as Tay was saying, if we can get a construction manager on board, we get through design development and our construction documents in time, we get it all bid out this coming late summer, fall, or in that time frame, we can lock in our prices to have everything. So it's in today's price and it's guaranteed.
Is any of this money eligible in the federal ARPA and all these other funds that are out there?
I don't believe it is, but I don't know enough about the ARPA funds.
Yeah, I don't know either. I just didn't know if that was something that was, there's some of this one-time money out there.
I know when the capital bill was being put together and some of the ARPA funds were looked into, stormwater was taken out of the bill for ARPA. But other than that, this one remained in.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think at least with the first round of ARPA funding, because this project was already planned, it was kind of on the books. It wasn't, it was a tough sell to make it a fresh COVID project at least a year ago, so.
Nice to hear you're back with us, Eric. I thought you were going to be in the doghouse there for a bit.
Well, she's right next door, and I don't know if I'm going to get out of here alive today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
So where the RFP started was looking at the ventilation for the State House, and we know that we had insufficient amount of outside air. We had issues with temperature control and humidity control. You can hold on, Alex. One of the items that the committee or the design firm identified as they were talking to the occupants of the buildings is anybody that sits near the windows in the House and Senate chamber feels a draft coming through those old windows. So one of the things they're suggesting is underneath the window seats, there's a single row of radiation, is increasing that radiation to 2 rows of radiation. I put this up as an alternate because it really doesn't affect the ventilation of the building. It's more of a comfort issue. It doesn't really pair well with any of the future projects that we're looking at, but it could be done as a standalone project sometime in the future for a little bit more money.
Okay.
So going down to the next alternate, Alex. This alternate here is all of the work that was shown in alternate C or phase C. It's all the work in the cafeteria, the legislative lounge, and the speaker's office. We could take that out of the project right now, save almost $5 million and plug it into the future project. If you knew that was going to be ongoing, we can leave it in this project for now and wait a year or two and see how the other project fares. And if nothing happens, we can do this work. If we put it off for 5 years, it'll be no worse than it is today. That particular area didn't really suffer during the humidity issues that we had in 2018. There is enough interconnection that if we air condition the main building properly, this area would probably not experience horrible humidity levels in the summertime.
Okay.
And the third alternate would replace the air handler that services the House committee rooms and the legislative lounge. It would not replace the distribution system at this time. What it would do is it would give us the horsepower at the air handler to do the proper dehumidification and temperature control and ventilation, but we would be using the existing induction units that are currently in their spaces, trying to move a little bit more air through them, which means it may be a little bit more drafty. But if we were going to be removing walls and reconfiguring those committee rooms, this would be work that could be done along with reconfiguring those committee rooms. But at the time we started the project, we didn't know anything about those future additions, so we wanted to fix what we had today. Because I'll tell you, I've been working for BGS since 1987. I've been hearing about additions ever since. We haven't built one yet. So I wanted to at least be able to fix the existing building.
Gotcha.
And so our ask for this is 6.8 million. And as you can see, when we went into phase A, we don't need all that money for this year, but what we are looking to do is, because of the economy and the size of the project, is to pre-purchase the air handlers and anything else that are long lead items, to have those in hand so that when summer of 23 comes around, we can hit the ground running and get a lot of that work done.
Joe, have you made this pitch to the House side yet?
Yes, we have.
Okay. I suspect you're going to be back in to talk about it some more when we get the bill from the House. Senator McCormick.
Thanks. How does this, all of these options, how do they relate to the more ambitious suggestions? You know, putting a second story, an additional story on the cafeteria. You know, this doesn't prejudice those decisions one way or another, does it?
No, it does not. But again, you know, being in the executive branch, the governor not supporting it, we weren't looking at it from that. The RFP did not go on the street looking for that. However, because we can't get a lot of the work done in just this coming summer or even the next summer, it would be over multiple years. If something were to take place and there was a passage to get funding to do an addition, the alternates that Tay has put forth can align us to that.
Okay, so we would not have to do this work and then rip it out for the new project.
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
I think this is structured so that for the next 2 years anyway, we can keep going. We can pre-buy the major components, and over the next 2 summers, take care of as much as can possibly be done in the original building without getting tangled up in whatever is next.
Okay. So I think I understand. Just put it yet another way.
Yeah.
We have the option of doing this or of not doing this, regardless of whether or not we do the other stuff.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
So let's take the screen share down. Unless anybody's got any more on the conversation, we'll expect to have you back when we see what the House has done with all of this. But appreciate the heads up.
You're welcome.
Tay, I hope you're out skiing today. Tay.
No, I'm working from home still, but I'm looking forward to being there on Friday.
Okay. Anything else you gentlemen want to tell us?
I have nothing more.
Okay, that concludes our YouTube presentation for this afternoon.